Well, right now, it is a Sunday morning here in London, England, and I just got out of church in this place right here. This is the Metropolitan Tabernacle Baptist Church, which is a very historic church here in London that goes back years and years. This particular building here goes all the way back to 1861, and the history of the church is probably most associated with a man who was the pastor here in the late 1800s. He's become known as the Prince of Preachers, but most people know him better as Charles Haddon Spurgeon. So, like I said, we are here at the Metropolitan Tabernacle Baptist Church here in London, England. And this particular structure, at least the portico, was constructed in 1861, or was finished in 1861, under the leadership of Charles Haddon Spurgeon. This is a man who was a brilliant communicator and not only was very influential on Christianity, but did a lot for the good of the city here in London. So we're going to be learning a little bit more about the history of this place and Charles Haddon Spurgeon. So Charles Haddon Spurgeon might be one of the most interesting men that you may or may not have ever heard of. He has been highly influential in the Christian world. Was born in 1834, and this is a guy who had a gift for speaking and communication. At the age of 15, he started preaching for the first time, 15 or 16 years old. And the church that he kind of took over and pastored, it was kind of an older congregation, had about 40 people. And under his leadership, it boomed to like 450 people. By the time he was 19 or 20 years old, he took over at the New Park Street Chapel, which later became the Metropolitan Tabernacle. And this was during the Victorian era, and at the time there was a lot of kind of confusion in the church with theology and things like that. And Spurgeon kind of became like a voice of clarity, and people just flocked to his church by the thousands. He spoke before 10,000 at one service, and then it continued to grow and grow and grow. I think the highest number I saw was around 23,000 people here in London who came to hear him speak. His church ended up getting so large when he moved down here that they ended up having to build a new building, and that's what we're looking at right now. This is the Metropolitan Tabernacle. It could seat I think around 6,000 people, and a lot of great work and a lot of great words by Spurgeon were uttered right here at this church. Now, after he died, the church burned down in like 1898, I believe, and the only thing that survived was the portico that we see today and the basement. It was rebuilt, and then in 1941 it was destroyed again by German bombing during the bombing of London in World War II, which is really kind of annoying because I would like to have seen that church. Dadgum Nazis are always ruining everything. But anyway, this is the church that Charles Haddon Spurgeon preached at. Okay, so that's a little bit on the Metropolitan Tabernacle Baptist Church. We are actually going to leave this place now and go to the south and look at a few other places that are associated with Spurgeon and some other people here in the London area. We've moved now to the south part of the city, to Spurgeon's College. Now, originally, I think this was in a different part of the city and was called the Pastor's College, but this was a college that was set up by Charles Spurgeon to help train and equip pastors and send them out to minister to other communities. This is a guy who did things right. He was a man of faith. He lived it out properly and put that faith into action. So not only was he preaching the gospel to the people here, but he also was leading a church that existed for the good of the community. One of the many things that he did that I find admirable was he was instrumental in helping to start an orphanage. He had a real heart for orphans. It's kind of motivated from a verse in the book of James, James 1:27. And it's one of the things that kind of connects me to Spurgeon. One of the questions that I get often is, what does this tattoo on my arm mean? Well, this is the Russian word adopted. My wife and I were motivated to go and adopt by a verse in Galatians 4. Ended up going and adopting 3 kids from Eastern Ukraine who were Russian speaking, hence the Russian language. But anyway, that is one of many things that I admire about Spurgeon. Here on the campus of Spurgeon's College, as you might expect, they have a statue of Charles Spurgeon. Here you can see he's got his hand raised in the air, and he's got his other hand on the Bible. And the Stockwell Orphanage, which was the orphanage that he helped to found, was started in 1867. And there was a woman who donated 20,000 pounds to help get it going. And when the money came in, he thought that it had been a mistake, went to this woman and said, "Hey, I wanted to thank you for the 200 pounds that you donated." And she said, 200, I donated 20,000. So that was his confirmation that she had given much to help this orphanage for boys get off the ground. You got to keep in mind, in London at this time, this was before child labor laws. There was a lot of fatherless children, a lot of children that were being exploited. And Spurgeon was very instrumental in providing not a place to stay, but a legitimate home for these boys, which was later expanded to include girls. Unfortunately, that orphanage was destroyed during the bombings in World War II. But Spurgeon and his church did a lot of other good things to serve the community. There was a cholera epidemic that broke out in London. Spurgeon himself was going door to door, seeing how he and the church could help the people, really putting himself at risk of getting cholera. During the Irish potato famine, there were a lot of Irish who were coming into London who were in a bad shape, and he and the church were there to help them. So here, again, is a person who was not only a man of faith, but someone who lived out that faith in a very practical way to help people physically and spiritually. Before we move on to the next place, there's one other thing here that caught my eye that I want to share. This is a memorial here at Spurgeon's College that is focusing on service. And Spurgeon, he was a witty guy and had a way with words. As a matter of fact, there's an Instagram account that I follow online that has like daily quotes from Charles Spurgeon. But here is a quote from Spurgeon talking about service. He says, "You cannot be Christ's servant if you are not willing to follow him, cross and all. What do you crave? A crown? Then it must be a crown of thorns if you are to be like him. Do you want to be lifted up? So you shall, but it will be upon a cross." Yes, that's one of many quotes by the Prince of Preachers, Charles Spurgeon. All right, one more spot that we're going to move on to. We've moved over now to a place called West Norwood Cemetery, and this is the place where Charles Haddon Spurgeon is laid to rest. But there's another well-known figure who is buried here. If you are into firearms and the history of World War I, well then I'm sure the name that Maxim is familiar to you. So here is the grave of Sir Hiram S. Maxim, who was born in 1840 and died in 1916, was a weapons inventor, was born in Maine and moved to England in 1881, and is pretty well known for developing the Maxim machine gun, which was the first portable, self-powered, fully automatic machine gun. It saw extensive use in the Russo-Japanese War and in the Boer Wars, and most notably in the First World War. Maxim also developed the delayed action fuse and smokeless gunpowder. He also had a role in developing an early airplane. But anyway, he became a British citizen in 1900 and was knighted a year later. So, as you can see, again, died in 1916, so he wouldn't live to see the end of the First World War. But here's the grave of Sir Hiram Maxim. Now, here's a grave that is here in the cemetery that I didn't know about until just now doing a little bit of research. But we managed to locate the grave of Henry Bessemer, who is the name behind the Bessemer process. If you've never heard of the Bessemer process, this is a process that was used to make steel in the mid-1800s by basically taking air and blowing it into molten iron, superheating it, and burning off all of the impurities. And it was a way to make steel in a very cheap and efficient way. This man, with his process, revolutionized the world. Railroad tracks were going to be made out of steel. High-rise buildings were going to be made out of steel. Andrew Carnegie is going to build his empire basically on the foundation that Henry Bessemer is going to lay for him. So yeah, this is pretty cool to be here at his grave. Those are a few of the historic graves here at West Norwood Cemetery. And then here on top of the hill at the cemetery, overlooking all of the other graves, is the final resting place of Charles Haddon Spurgeon. So here at the final resting place of Charles Spurgeon, well, we can see his likeness etched in stone here, along with, of course, appropriately, a Bible in front of him, quoting from 2 Timothy chapter 4. And then down here, it says, "Here lies the body of Charles Haddon Spurgeon, waiting for the appearance of his Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and also that of his dearly beloved wife, Susan, who is also laid to rest here with him." And then down at the bottom, it quotes Revelation 21:4, where it says, "God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away." And then if we go over here to the side, well, it gives us a little bit of information about Charles Spurgeon. So this monument was erected in memory of C.H. Spurgeon, who was born at Kelvedon, Essex, June 19th, 1834, and fell asleep in Jesus at Mentone, France, January 31st, 1892. Spurgeon had a lot of physical ailments that he suffered from. Had gout, he had a kidney disease, also suffered from depression. So I think he would go to France from time to time to recover. And then if we go here to the back, we were talking about Spurgeon quotes earlier. Well, here's one more, where he said, "When you see my coffin carried to the silent grave, I should like every one of you, whether converted or not, to be constrained to say, he did earnestly urge us, in plain and simple language, not to put off the consideration of eternal things. He did entreat us to look at Christ." So, anyway, also, we talked about how his wife is also buried here. So you can see where it says in loving memory of Susanna Spurgeon there. born in 1832 and died in 1903. But that is the final resting place of Charles Haddon Spurgeon. All right, well, there you go. That was a little bit on the life of Charles Haddon Spurgeon. Kind of a different figure from the people that we normally cover on this channel, but regardless of your faith or what you believe, I definitely think that he is a guy who is worth studying and learning more about. But anyway, that was the final resting place of the Prince of Preachers, Charles Spurgeon.